Hurricane Matthew's hitting us, and hitting us hard. The Category 5 system is moving up the coastline, and residents in low-lying areas are taking the worst of it. Sustained winds of 150 miles an hour, with gusts over 180. The storm surge is up to, is this right? Up to 10 feet over normal. Low-lying area or not, if you're near the coast, find some place safe for you and your loved ones. We'll stay on the air with updates as best we can.
Hurricane Matthew was a raging beast. It scratched at the outside of the walls with claws of bent and broken tree branches, and threatened to smash glass with raindrops like machine gun fire, propelled at 150-mile-per-hour winds. Jack stared out through the glass, admiring the storm. He had borne witness to more than his fair share of Category 5 hurricanes, but this one seemed to be coming of Florida with meanness in its heart. He marveled at its ferocity. Jack was staying in one of the upstairs bedrooms in Lila Ambrose's sprawling Dade County mansion. He'd been crashing here since coming back from Chippewa Falls, as he got his bearings for this new situation. Sadie and her team, and Lila and her mission. Jack had new allies. He had new friends. He also had higher stakes. Jack hunted emissaries. The press called him Closed Casket Jack and thought him to be a mad serial killer. But with his now infamous post-hole digger, Jack wasn't committing random murders and splitting open random skulls. He was searching for the sentient tumors that lived in the heads of ghastly servants. Now Jack was still fighting the same war. He was still trying to get back to the island and find his twin sister Becky. But with new resources and new allies, he would be able to take it to the next level. As Jack wandered downstairs to make himself a sandwich, the power went out. It popped right back on, because Lila Ambrose had several power systems for her compound. He made himself a peanut butter sandwich, drank some sour milk straight from the container that was definitely spoiled, but not yet chunky style, just the way he liked it. That's when the power went out again. And this time, it stayed out. Jack held onto the short, stout cheese knife which he had used to make and cut his sandwich, and he walked to the windows nearest the front entranceway. Looking out into the wind and the chaos, it took his eyes a moment to adjust, but then he saw them. People. Dark figures scurrying over the security fences and into the massive yard of the mansion. There were dozens of them, with more coming every electric blue flash of lightning. They were all carrying weapons. Some guns, mostly blades, axes, clear-cutting tools, surgical implements, and exotic, spiked monstrosities made only to shred and bludgeon. Jack cracked his knuckles. He couldn't help but to smile, just a little bit. Game on. The cultists might have been ready for Hurricane Matthew, but nothing could have prepared them for Hurricane Jack. Drinking whiskey in the kitchen and telling scary stories around the fire. Music, monsters, and mayhem. Killers, cannibals, and cults. Fearful fiction and furious fact. Tall tales and terrifying truths. This is a scary home companion. The cultists were pouring over the fence, but they were all skirting the main house. They knew that the mansion was just for looks. Lila Ambrose lived much deeper in the property, in a more fortified compound. None of them so much as looked at the house. Not until Jack stepped out the front door. He was wearing a bright yellow rain slicker and brandishing a cheese knife that was still smudged with peanut butter. Indeed, Jack looked so deranged, so filled with ill intent and bloodlust, that the cultists assumed he must be one of them. And they assumed this until Jack stepped up to the closest cultist and plunged the knife into her sinus cavity, lodging it deep in her head. He plucked the nail-studded baseball bat from her twitching fingers and used it to cave in the temple of the man standing next to her. Those bent, rusty nails went deep and hooked tight into that skull. Jack let the bat go and yanked the cheese knife free from her face before the woman collapsed. Quickly, more joined the fray. Jack went to one knee and plunged his knife into the soft, white underbelly of a middle-aged man. He plucked a pair of custom-handled knives from the bleeding man's belt holster, and then quickly tested their sharpness by laying his prey open on either side of the neck, meeting in the middle. A behemoth woman, wielding a 6-tined double pitchfork, came in hard. Jack was nimble. He sidestepped her, but then he ran into a goon who was wearing a barbed wire headdress like a crown of thorns. They rumbled-tumbled to the ground, all wrapped up. The man came up on top and snapped his head down, butting Jack in the nose with that barbed wire, and then wiping his face back and forth, trying to shred him. Jack stuck a knife into the man's side, and when the goon yelped, Jack reached up with both hands and grabbed the sides of that barbed wire headdress. He slipped it, pulling it down over the man's face, laying it right over his eyes, and then started pushing and yanking it back and forth like a garrote. The man shrieked. Jack lifted with both arms, really doing some deep tissue damage, and raised the man up off him bodily by the face. The behemoth woman was back. She made no attempt to spare her colleague, and instead slammed that double pitchfork down into his back. Those 6 extra long tines popped out through the front of his chest, just inches away from Jack. The woman leaned and pushed down on the pitchfork. Jack twisted the barbed wire. He rolled onto his side and slipped away before the body could slam down on top of him. He got to his feet as the woman pulled her tines free of the corpse. The winds made the plastic yellow ends of Jack's slicker whip around his legs, and the rain washed it clean in seconds. The behemoth woman turned and called for others. Most of the cultists were long gone or on their way to long gone, but the few stragglers responded to her call. She smiled at Jack with crooked yellow teeth. "You're some kind of hero, huh? You can't stop all of us." Jack smiled back. "I don't need to stop you. Ambrose has security back there with her. Don't you hear that?" Even through the thunder and the roar of the wind through the trees, they could all hear faint, distant gunshots, yells and screams. Jack confided in her. "I don't give a fuck about any of you people. I just wanted a little warm-up before I got to the real work." She had half a dozen people with her now, fanning out around Jack. He saw a series of goons with handheld killing tools, including 2 guys and a woman who wore matching lycra face masks. They carried a machete, an axe, and a chainsaw, respectively, that were all in a matching color scheme. Jack was incredulous. "Are you dicks wearing costumes?" He launched himself towards them, punching one of them in the mouth and then shoving him into the guy with the axe. He picked up the axe, swiveled, and sunk it into the hip of the woman with the chainsaw, which he then relieved her of. At which point Jack ran, swinging and howling into the remaining cultists, who tried their best to scatter, but Jack wouldn't let them. He was madness triumphant, blood and rain streaking down his slicker, furious glee in his eye. He ran through the hurricane gales to slash bits and pieces out of the backs, sides, and necks of these fleeing cult members. The mistake most people make when using a chainsaw is using it for aggressive power cutting. A chainsaw works best like a carving knife. Cut with the grain, hold on loosely, gently lead the dance, but don't command it. Jack took little nips and swipes, flesh wounds and gushing gapers alike. He didn't need to kill these people. They weren't his real prey tonight. But then, when he found himself running up on the behemoth woman, he decided the playtime was over. He ran her through with that chainsaw, sinking it up to the plastic housing in the meat of her back, and left her to bleed out as he walked over to the fence. He stopped to look around. The other cultists were all gone, either dead or run off to meet another fate. The clock was ticking. He had to get a move on. He stripped off the slicker and clambered over the fence. On every one of the tall, sturdy cement fence posts was a small black box. This was Lila's special security system, separate from the other ones. These boxes released tiny bursts of microwave radiation, strong enough to keep emissaries from breaching the perimeter. Every single person who had come in so far had been sent in as foot soldiers to shut down this security system, so that the field generals, the bosses, the real bad guys, could finally have access. Jack didn't give a shit about the cultists. He was an emissary hunter. The ones he wanted were outside the fence. He disappeared into the trees, leaving the dangerous sheep to their lethal red herring, and he searched for his real prey. Nick Braithwaite and his team of emissaries were waiting with increasing irritation about 100 yards outside the fence. And it was the fence itself that bothered them, not the raindrops stinging like needles or the tree branches snapping off all around them. Just that fucking fence. Even being this close to it was painful for them. The emissaries in their brain tissue were normally very still, nestled down deep and curled up tight. But proximity to the microwave bursts agitated them. It made them move and twitch and slither around inside, which caused incredibly painful headaches in the host. Nick checked his watch again, and then the walkie. He walked up and down the line, taking a head count. The people they had sent into the compound were all soldiers. He didn't expect any of them to live, and quite frankly, he couldn't have given a fuck one way or the other. They didn't need to survive. They just needed to shut down that security station. A few of them had gone in with explosives. All they needed to do was get close enough to trigger them. Once that security station was destroyed, these boxes would turn off. And then it would be open season on Lila Ambrose and her people. Nick counted 11, and that was one shy of what he was expecting. He went back down the line, counting again, and realized that old Henry was missing. Henry had been an emissary for a great many years, and while his loyalty was beyond question, his host body was coming to the end of its usefulness. Nick assumed that old Henry must have wandered off to relieve himself, yet again. Which was, in fact, precisely what had happened. With one notable change. After old Henry had finished zipping up this time, Jack had hit him from behind, coming down like a ton of bricks with a double forearm and sending him sprawling. Because of the roar of Hurricane Matthew, none of the other emissaries heard the sounds of Hurricane Jack, even though he was just a few feet away. He put old Henry in a chokehold and dragged him off. The closer they got to the fence, the more the old man struggled. Jack just cinched down ever tighter, dragging him ever closer until he could toss old Henry bodily into the fence. Jack had always wanted to see what this looked like. Usually, he cut out the slugs from the heads with his post hole digger and then tossed them in a microwave oven so that he could watch them cook. But this one was cooking inside the skull. Old Henry's eyes blistered and dissolved from the inside out, releasing a torrent of glittering green goo that vomited down his chest. Jack found it entirely fucking satisfying. He took the pistol and the knife from old Henry's belt and paused to make another notch on his arm. One of dozens. in neat little rows up and down both arms, one for every emissary he had killed. And then he went off to grab another. Jack lurked in the rain-soaked shadows of a stand of trees, watching the emissaries. They were not cautious, they were not looking around, they were all staring out at Lila Ambrose's estate, just waiting for that explosion. The thunder and the wind masked Jack. He plucked a woman from the end of the line and dragged her over to the fence. He hadn't brought his post-hole digger. Besides, this was way more efficient. She died just like old Henry had. And then he went back to claim another. Things might have gone on in such a manner for quite a while, Jack taking them one by one. Except for that security station finally exploded. It was a shocking blast, a blazing white bloom in the tangled garden of black clouds above. One that, unfortunately, lit up Jack bright as day. Only for a heartbeat, but that was enough. Unlike the cultists, the emissaries all carried guns and blades. Jack opened fire with his stolen pistol and broke running into the trees before they could shoot back. He didn't hit anybody. He didn't even come close. Jack was a fair to middling shot on the best of days, and the hurricane was doing him no favors. He edged closer to the fence, keeping his eyes locked on the enemy. They were shooting blindly, and a couple of them tried to come after him, only to stop short, clutching at their heads. While they were momentarily dazed, Jack took another crack at shooting them. He missed one, but he notched the other one twice in the neck. There was no longer any need to retreat. Jack found cover behind a tree, and he watched them. They were confused, they were pissed off, they were all looking towards Nick for answers. Answers that he did not have. Jack did, but he wasn't sharing. The cultists had obviously gotten to the security station, which meant they had destroyed all of the systems that were already offline due to the power outage. The one security system that they were trying to turn off, those black boxes, that one was still going strong. It was managed off-site and powered by a series of geothermal heat pumps. With multiple redundancies and no connection to any power grid, it was self-sustaining, and nothing short of an EMP would be able to shut it down. While they shouted at Nick, Jack circled around their flank, hiding in the storm. He kept his eyes on their leader. He wanted to kill all of them. He needed to kill all of them, but he needed something else from Nick Braithwaite. He had read Sadie's file on Nick and knew just what sort of monster he was. He knew that Nick was the lieutenant for the priest with red hands. But there was something else in that file. Something Jack needed the emissary to confirm for him. Nick rallied his remaining troops, and then he dispatched them in pairs into the trees where Jack was last seen. When Nick was finally all alone, Jack emerged from the rain behind him. He crept up slowly, the empty gun replaced in his hand with a never-empty blade. Nick turned to look at him. "I guess this mission isn't a total waste after all. It's nice to meet you, Jack. I've been waiting a long time. Nick held a taser, and he shot Jack in the chest with 2 little barbs that twisted his body into knots and sent him to the ground. On cue, the other emissaries returned, and they set upon him, binding him, blinding him, stripping him, gagging him, preparing him, and then taking him away. Jack. Oh, Jack. Wake up, buddy. It's just me and you now, Jack. Nick took the blindfold off and then removed Jack's leather eye patch. Now he was completely nude except for his socks and sneakers. Jack had been bound to some kind of sex dungeon nightmare of a metal framework. His hands were tied together under his chest, bound to a curved metal rod. He was bent over, exposed, vulnerable, and completely unable to move. Can you feel that, Jack? There's romance in the air. Nick was whistling a happy tune as he disrobed in front of his victim. All around them were bodies of recent freshness, bound to similar torture racks. All had suffered truly horrific fates. The other handful of surviving emissaries had left them alone. Nick stepped behind Jack and began his most vile of assaults. Jack lay limply beneath him, holding in his cries and his grunts, not wanting to give his assailant the satisfaction of his pain. Are you all out of fight already, Jack? We're just getting started. I was hoping you would be a screamer, like Becky. At the mention of his twin sister, Jack tensed up. Nick liked that. Oh, did you not know? Poor Becky Minor, gone missing. She wasn't missing at all, buddy. She was with me. Jack found his fight and struggled against the ropes. Blood dripped from his mouth as he gnashed his teeth in helpless rage. I took Becky, her and both of her little college friends. Pledges that didn't make the cut at the sorority house, and they wound up with me. First here, and then we took a little boat ride. Some other people wanted to meet her. Twins are very powerful, Jack, and now they will have a matching set. And I already have my matching set. He leaned in and whispered venom into Jack's ear. I'm fucking you just like I fucked your sister, Jack. Her and her 2 friends. Jack wiggled his shoulders. He grunted and spat blood and hammered his head against the metal bar. Nick continued, gloating. I never mount a sacrifice the traditional way, you know what I mean? We don't want any little bundles of joy, do we? This way, I get a taste of everyone I take out there. Men and women and young and old. You all come to love me. Jack collapsed again, limp, held up by the framework. Nick, tired of his relentless violation, and walked around to stand in front of Jack again. He admired his handiwork. If you were mine, Jack, I'd finish myself off right in that big, sexy eye socket of yours. Finish us both off at the same time. But you aren't mine. The priest wants you. I just needed my little taste first, while you could still hate it. Nick walked away, still nude and turgid. He fetched a sturdy glass jar from a nearby shelf. He walked it back to Jack and held it up to his face. Jack's only eye fluttered open, saw the black tumor oozing around the inside of the glass, and then closed again. In a few minutes, you and me are going to be brothers. Then we can go see the priest together. He has some pretty amazing plans for us, Jack. Nick unlatched the lid and started to break the seal when Jack murmured, So, the priest isn't coming? No, not until we take care of this. Then he'll talk to you. Jack stood up. The ropes fell away from his wrists. He held a little sliver of a razor blade, one that he had kept hidden inside his cheek, and then used to slowly cut himself free during the assault. Jack came over the top of the framework and slammed Nick to the ground. He wrestled the jar from his grip. Nick spat. You're my bitch now, just like Becky. Jack smashed the jar against the side of Nick's face. The glass was very sturdy, so he had to do it twice more before the glass broke into thick, brutal shards. Jack snarled. I spent months on the island, asshole. Nothing that you or your pathetic cock could ever do would approach that level of suffering and pain. You arrogant motherfucker. You didn't rape me. I let you think you were in control. I was keeping up the act until the priest showed up. But if he ain't coming, well, now, you're the one who's fucked. Nick was too groggy to crawl away. He looked up at Jack, his glittering green eyes filling with fresh blood from his lacerated scalp. Jack placed the broken jar, with the quivering slug still clinging to the rim, on top of Nick's exposed penis and testicles, which were now dangling between his legs. Shards down, of course. Hey, Nick, give them a message for me, huh? Tell them you don't need to worry about Sadie or Lila, or Oregon, or Bill Handel. You fear me. And he stomped down on the rim of the jar, sending the slivers and chunks of fractured glass into warm, yielding flesh. Then, just to be safe, he twisted his foot back and forth a few times until he heard that glass breaking through and scraping against the wet cement floor. Jack put on Nick's neatly folded pants and shirt, his own having been cut away. He left the emissary gurgling and whimpering on the ground. He opened the door, looking to see if the other emissaries were still alive. They weren't. It was only Sadie, waiting for him, alone. She chewed on the side of her lip nervously. How'd it go? The priest ain't coming. Shit. Jack asked, how'd it go on your end? Jesus Christ, it was amateur hour out there, Jack. Some of them even surrendered. Can you believe that? Hey, are you okay? There was a long pause before he said, yeah, I'm okay. She reached out her hand as they walked away, and Jack held it.
Hurricane Matthew's gone. The Gold Coast took quite a pounding, but that's a problem for some other state now. For myself and everyone here, I hope you and your loved ones are safe. Things can be replaced. People can't. And now let's get to the news. And there's a lot of it in the wake of Matthew. A series of antique glass jars have been washing up on local beaches. Although they seem harmless enough, the DRO has advised that they may contain toxic chemicals. If you see one of these jars, don't touch it. Call it in. The remains of 3 missing police officers have been found in Dade County. There's no official statement from the Miami PD yet, but their deaths are said to be related to the hurricane. And here's one for the News of the Weird file. After being missing for almost 20 years, the legendary boat the Flayed Lady has returned to local waters. In the aftermath of Hurricane Matthew, the research vessel was reported drifting on the edge of the famous Bermuda Triangle.
Thank you for listening to another episode of A Scary Home Companion. Find the show on social media. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. Or shout at us directly at ascaryhomecompanion@gmail.com. If you want to hear all of Jack's story, and I know you do, you should listen to, in this order, The Mirror Man, Closed Casket Jack, Apex Predators Parts 1 and 2, and Chippewa Death Trip. Jack is also featured prominently in Apex Predators Aftermath, one of the bonus episodes available exclusively on Patreon. Sign up today. Help the show keep growing. The episode was edited and produced by Jeff Davidson. Guest voice by Kurt Kaniewski. Featured the music Lull before the storm that never comes by Looking Forward. For Those About to Rock by Jose O. Salvadore. Night Hunt by Exorcista de Style. No Words, No Thoughts by Swans. Mast in the Storm by Alice in Wonderland Syndrome, and Storm by Mother Witch. As always, the theme music was provided by Chelsea Oxendine.